This is a tour of the Joseph Russell donation claim, the house more commonly known as the Blundell House. Joseph Russell came across the plains in the mid 1840s. The Russells and Tillers and the Ketchings all came across together, settled this area. Uh, Joseph Russell took a 160-acre donation claim, supposedly had a log cabin on it between the 1850 and 1870s. He was mainly doing timber and mining. Uh, his daughters married into the Tiller and Catching family, and a son Riley who stayed around for a while. And there are still family in this area, Medford and Roseburg. Uh, Sometime in the 1870s, when James Blundell came here to this area from Sacramento after the gold rush there, he and Russell became partners for a short while. They split the property in the 1870s. 79 is when there was some friendly dispute and they divided the property in half. Blundell expanded the claim to quite a bit more than 160 acres. He had 5 children, and just before settling in Riddle, married his wife Martha. They raised sheep. Uh, it isn't known who built the house. The house was there around 1870. It's unclear whether the Russells or the Blundells built it, but the Blundells moved in just as they got married. And he was a teacher. He did many things. He was a census taker. He taught in Myrtle Creek, Canyonville, Azalea. He was also a state congressman for this area. Uh, After his death, the property on Shoestring Creek there, the children formed a partnership and retained ownership of it. Um, Phil Blundell, the son, went off to the World War One right at the end of the war and stayed overseas for a while. But when he came back, he bought the family out from his siblings and planted plum trees. He did marry his wife Bertha, and he had no children. Uh, so the heirs of some of these families, the Agees, the Mayfields, still live in this area. Um, Phil sold the place to Eugene and Myrtle Gallagher in the 1840 or so. And they were farmers raising cattle and farming, continuing the plum orchard that Phil planted. And there was an old barn that on property that Phil had built, and they tore that down and built a new barn, which still stands to this day. The Gallaghers owned this property from the 40s into the 80s, the mid 80s, and she married Hiles, who lived down the street, so that's her married name. And in 1987, Bob and Margaret Martin bought the property and farmed and raised cattle, raised their children there in the old house, and added another house to the property. Mules, farmed grain and hay and pigs and a little bit of everything. And they kept the property until 2004 when Lisa and Jerry Sable bought it. That's us, our present owners. And the house itself is called a four square. It's 25 feet to the side, all in local cedar plank, 26-foot tall, two-story building. It's very unusual in that it's vertical sided like a barn would be, not like most of the houses with vertical siding. And it had no framing. There were no stud walls in it, just two 1x10 cedar boards doubled together. That was the walls. Uh, as I restored it, we took off layers and layers and layers of newspaper, cardboard, linen sheeting, wallpaper, paneling. just just people fixing it up little by little as the years went by. So as I said, the house was built around 1870, added to often. There was a pantry and a couple of additions and a barn next to it, a granary, several outhouses. And there's a couple of stories. We'd like to credit some of these pictures to the Pioneer Museum for the pictures of the Blundells. And Phil Blundell, his niece, took an oral history from him in 1971. And he said, this being the year 1971, I thought I would tell about the original pioneer homes and where they were located. The oldest two now standing are near where Russell Creek empties into Cow Creek on the William Wilson land claim. Next was built about the same time on John Ketching Place on Ketching Creek, now the Nooner Place next to the I.W. Birch home. Afterwards, the Quine Place, now the Carter Place, next the Jim Catching Place, now the Logsdon Place. Next, the Dyer Place near the junction of Shoestring Creek and Ash Creek, which don't actually come together, but you get the general gist of the neighborhood. The Jim Catching Place, now the Logsdon Place, was built about the same time as the John Ketching and William Wilson homes were built. The first bridge across Cow Creek was built before the railroad came to the valley, about 1.5 miles up creek from the present bridge, as Canyonville was the post office and town until the railroad reached Riddle in the 80s. Before that bridge was built, each of the settlers would ford wherever they could, some at the mouth of Council Creek, but mostly at the mouth of Russell Creek. Wilson Creek is being the best ford. Road at the time was a one-track. On the creek bank to the Birch Place, now the Carter Place, and easy along the base of the hill to the southeast corner of the Birch Place. Then the southeast to the junction of the Mitchell Ass Creek and Shoestring Creek. The east to the Canyonville as of now. So Linda Mayfield recorded that. So I hope you enjoy the history tour. Be willing to drive by and take a look at all the old houses. Thank you for looking. The house did have two small porches, not like the larger ones we added. The yellow trim is pretty close, close to what the trim on the windows and doors were. That's the old barn. This is building the new barn, the Gallagher's family. That's the finished new barn in present day.